Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. This is episode 5 of our Survivor Stories series. And I've got to be honest with you, I thought I knew what to expect walking into this one. I've sat with J.R. Sweet, Kathy O'Brien, Annika Lucas, and Max Lowen so far. And I've heard things that most people spend their whole lives pretending don't exist. And I thought I had some kind of handle on how deep this goes, but I didn't. And I want to say this for anyone who's joining us for the first time, that you might want to go back and watch those episodes first, because this interview will make a lot more sense when you understand how consistent this pattern is. It's different people, different countries, different decades, but the same program, the same methods, the same evil. And so what you're about to hear is the testimony of a 77-year-old woman, a physician, a humanitarian, a mother, someone who spent 20 years in Russia building an underground railroad that rescued over 70,000 children from child traffickers. So who is this person? Her name is Dr. Juliette Engel. So Juliette wasn't trafficked by strangers. She was sold by her own father at 6 years old into the CIA's MKUltra program. Now, that was in 1955, and 5 of her uncles actually helped found the CIA, and another one helped start the NSA. So this wasn't random, this was generational. And I know how that sounds, right? I mean, I know some people's first instinct may be to close the tab, to switch off, and just go do something else to distract you what from these personal stories really tell us. Some might say it's too much, too crazy, too dark. And there is, as a warning, there is some pretty dark stuff in here. So I get it, I really do. No sane person wants any of these things to be true, because if they are, well, the systems that we've come to know and that we trust no longer look as trustworthy. But here's the thing. In December 2024, the National Security Archive released over 1,200 classified CIA documents. And those documents confirm that the government ran a program using drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and extreme psychological and physical torture on American citizens, often on children, and almost always without knowledge or consent. And this was for decades. So is it all just in the past? Do they just forgive and forget? I don't know about that. Well, today though, we're going to hear from a primary source. Hear from someone who lived and breathed these experiments herself, but also someone who rescued many others from those programs. And she describes a lot in this discussion. She describes this horrifying spinning wheel ritual and the exact chant they used over and over on the children until their sense of reality broke down. She takes us to Disneyland, and not in the way you would normally think of. She talks about what they were harvesting from children's bodies. And she connects all of it to what you're seeing in today's schools, in politics, in the culture, like everything you're seeing right now. And then there's the moment. It's kind of strange, but there's this moment where I'm sitting here listening to her, and I realize that she's describing a school program that was running right inside public schools. It's this program that pulled out gifted kids once a week, gave them puzzles and logic problems, took them somewhere else to kind of learn this stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, wait, I was in that. I was in that program. But don't worry, I dropped out in the 3rd grade. I didn't like the typing exercises, but still, that was a lot for me to think about. So before we get into this, I need to remind you of a few things. If you carry fragments of memories that you've never been able to explain, dark things, just be careful with this one. Watch it with someone that you trust. Just go slow. If you're a parent or grandparent, this episode is not for children. Like, it's dark stuff. So please don't even have them in the room if you're watching or listening. And if you're someone who's just hearing about this for the first time, look, I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm just letting her speak and tell her story. So just follow your own discernment. That's honestly the most important tool that you can develop right now. In a world that's full of propaganda and noise and engineered confusion, build that discernment muscle. Listen to what your gut tells you. And I'm not endorsing every single claim that she makes, but I'm telling you that the documented evidence behind what she describes is real. It's in the government's own files. And it's never been more important for us to understand. So let's get into it. This is episode 5 of the Survivor series with Dr. Juliette Engel. Juliette, it is such an honor to have you on the show, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you. I've watched your programs, and I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. And it's interesting because I'm having a lot of people are now coming to me. I actually had someone text me at midnight last night saying, "Gosh, I just saw your Survivor series, and it's so brave to put that out there." And I find that this is one of those litmus tests, right, of the people that have a large platform. Will they touch this issue? And most of them won't, because this is one of those kind of forbidden areas that you don't go into for various reasons, whether it's the Overton window or whether the people that are funding those platforms don't want this to be talked about. But I think that it's like what I've understood through these discussions with people like yourself is when you understand the world through this lens, everything starts to make a lot more sense. And it's also part of enabling people to kind of break out of this programming, break out of this kind of mass hypnosis that has locked everyone up from seeing the truth. And so I guess let's just start with yourself, and you can start wherever you want to, but how did you become part of the MK Ultra program? Like what's your story with this?
Well, at the age of 6, my father sold me into the program. And I should say that I was born in 1949, so I'm 77 years old now. And to put the history of how old that is, the CIA was started in 1947, including by 5 of my uncles. I was born in 1949. The NSA was started in about 1952 by another one of my uncles. And the MK Ultra program was started in 1953. So all these beginnings, it's really only that long, only about 80 years that the CIA has existed, and you've had the coming together of components from the Nazis, from the Zionists, from the Jesuits, from all these different groups who are able to sort of share efforts to create a mind-controlled population who's willing to commit genocide. And that's what that's the goal. It was a stated goal when I was 6 years old and sold into the program. The first thing I learned is that there are too many people in the world, and that most of them need to go. And they had us divided into sheep and goats. And the ones that survived the program were the goats. Everyone else was the sheep, and the sheep were all going to die. And so when I was 6 years old, my father took me to a park and met a friend of his from the Army, or from the Navy, sorry. And they drugged me with my first bottle of Coca-Cola. And I woke up being raped by the man that my father had taken me to meet. And I could see my father. I was face down on this table on top of this black shiny cloth that smelled like dust. And he was attacking me from behind. And to me, as a child, children don't experience sex as sex. It's just violence. So he was stabbing me in the back. And I was screaming for my father. And my father turned to me and said, "This is what I raised you for." And then he made me watch while another man paid him money and counted out the bills. And he took a big wad of cash while I was being molested. And then in the car drive home, I came to the realization that I was alone. I already knew something was terribly wrong with my relationship with my mother. I still can't even remember her. I think she'd been in the MK Ultra program system for a generation. It's multi-generational. I think it's gone on for a long time. But I realized I was completely on my own. And so 6 years old.
Now, before then, was that the turning point? Like up until then, was your father just your father to you? Did he ever abuse you, or was this just this complete shock and complete shattering of your entire world at that moment when the person that is supposed to be your protector? I know that that's how these things work too, right? Like they inverse the roles. The person that's most loving and most caring becomes the person that is the one that is torturing or harming. And so was that a flip for you? Was there any indication of this beforehand?
It was a huge flip. And my mother had been abusive all that time. So I'd completely identified with the protector being my father. And when my father turned on me like that, I had nothing left. It was like, I felt like this wall of glass was forming between me and the adults in my world. And I really had to make a decision. Am I going to grow up and survive this? Or, what am I going to do? And
another question. So you say that many of your uncles were involved in the formation of the CIA and the NSA. And so is it your what about your family was so, like, why was your family that involved in these intelligence agencies?
Oh, I think it went way back, generations back. And they were inventors. My great-grandfather invented the tunneling railroads and was able to move medieval buildings. Nobody knew how he did it. He ran an engineering firm that worked all over the world. It was the world's largest architects and engineering firms at the beginning of the 20th century. And he had, they rebuilt harbors in Japan. They were all over the world, Budapest. They moved St. Stephen's Church across several feet so that they could build the river, the bridge over the Charles River. So he was very famous, very successful, and his 5 sons took over the businesses, but they weren't him. But he also invented the music business. So several of the sons and the families came to Los Angeles, and they started the U.S. Music Company. And it was the first time that music had been recorded and people could buy these rolls that were then put inside a piano, but it was different it wasn't a player piano. It was actual recorded music. And so that became the basis of the record companies in LA. And so the family was that kind of family, very, very royal, very, I suppose you definitely say bloodline. And I realized that's why the children that came into the program, that's why I was a goat and not a sheep. And that's why they didn't kill me during the rituals when other children would be killed in front of me. And which led to me growing up with such terrible survivor's guilt that I felt responsible for their deaths. And it really wasn't until my 70s when I was able to let go of the idea that as a 6, 7, 8-year-old child, I could save these other children. And when I did grow up and I escaped from the MK Ultra program, and I really encourage people to read my book, Sparky, Surviving Sex Magic, because I wrote that really regressing back into the period of being a child and focusing on the time when I was 10 years old and living in Imperial Beach, California, which is right on the Mexican border, and basically the Tijuana sewer. And I was being taken back and forth, trafficked across the border for various kinds of rituals and time travel, extraterrestrial communication. This is what they were experimenting with in California. And they would take troops of children down to Mexico, and we'd live like Lord of the Flies on the beaches as they had us transport, time travel through other dimensions and other times. And a lot of children died. So I sort of lost myself.
That's okay.
I wanted to get to the fact that eventually I lived in Russia for 20 years and was able to really manifest my desire to rescue, repatriate, help other children, prevent human trafficking, and eventually build up an underground railroad that rescued children from all over the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, North Africa, and it was done with cooperation of hundreds of organizations and police forces in dozens of countries. And we were able to rescue, by the time I left Russia in 2010, we'd rescued over 70,000 children and women and labor trafficking young men. So I wanted to come back and do that in America, because when I got back in 2010, when I'd left, really, which was 1990, I sort of had the idealized, I couldn't remember my childhood. I couldn't remember anything. I just wanted to do this. And when I came back, I realized how bad the situation was in America. And I realized that it wasn't satisfactory for me not to remember anything from my own past. And I really didn't. I could barely remember a few things, like my father selling me. I remembered that. But I had to remember. So I went through the process of remembering and wrote the book, Sparky, Surviving Sex Magic.
And so I've got about 10 different questions. I'm trying to sort through which ones to get to first.
I know, it's such a big swath.
It is. And I definitely want to talk about some of the things that you mentioned. But one question that kind of came to me is when you're talking about the formation of these agencies, right, in the 40s and 50s, it'd be easy to maybe think that that was when this whole thing began. But is it actually that a lot of these rituals and the science of this, right? It's a science. It's the science of breaking a human mind through trauma and then creating dissociation and then creating all these things. Is this a science that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years through various bloodlines and through these families passed down? And was the creation of the CIA basically just kind of taking all of that knowledge and putting it into more of a government kind of military industrial complex program? Like, what's the history of this look like?
Well, yes, in that they've been trying to manipulate human beings for a long time, and you've got all the different variations of religion and the rise of Gnosticism, trying to make human beings gods, and the goal in MK Ultra over and over, repeated over and over again, is to defeat God. But the thing that happened in the 1930s and 40s was the rise of the Nazis. So, and by the time you had the Nuremberg trials, you had over 1,500 Nazi scientists taken out of these concentration camps, where they had been given the science, they'd been given the electricity, they'd been given all these tools that didn't exist in prior efforts to mass control the population, but they had them, and they had unlimited access to human beings, and they didn't care who they hurt or what they did, or, it was completely devoid of humanity. And what happened in Nuremberg, and I know this is the case, I had 5 of my uncles who were in Nuremberg. They were all German speakers. My great-grandmother was German. And they were, because of their language skills, they were involved in bringing those Nazi scientists to the United States and putting through a project called Project Paperclip. So they weren't executed. We thought what they had, and we thought these evil men who were in Nuremberg looked at this research that they had, which they should have destroyed. They should have hung them all and destroyed the research, and that should have been the end of it. But they saw the value of it to themselves. So they brought these Nazi scientists over by some people say hundreds, some people say thousands, and to Huntsville, Alabama. And from there, they redistributed them throughout the United States. and gave them unlimited funding. And what they did, like in my case, they gave them access to their own children. So each family chipped in a child. And I think they picked the child that I don't know why they picked me, but I guess they thought I was smart. So the children that were in the GOAT group were kids like me who were children of high-level intelligence officials. And the rest were, a lot of them were brought over from, anytime you've got war and you've got unprotected children, you've got massive human trafficking. And that's where these children came from. Just like right now, they're calling all of these children brought into the United States, sort of labeling them as Mexicans, but that's not true. It was a conscious decision by the CIA, and you'll find it in the documents that I sent you. They made the conscious decision to call all children that they were massively trafficking across the borders for use in the MK Ultra programs and experimentation and extracting chrome and things that they were starting to do in the 1950s. They made the decision to call them all Mexicans because they decided that Americans would be less reactive than if they called them German children, German refugees or Russian refugees. And right now it's Ukrainian refugees. How many of those children are being trafficked in the United States right now? I mean, we have State Department documents showing the State Department trafficked over 500,000 children over 2 years, brought them in, gave them to shipping companies. We have the documents, we have the contracts, and then they claim they don't know where they went. And if you've ever had a government contract of any kind, I mean, you document every coffee break, so they know where they went, they know what happened to them. They're not talking, and our country is paralyzed in this mind fog that it comes right out of the programming. And I think now that I'm in my 70s, it's wearing off to the point where I can see it more simply, more clearly, without all the huge magic overlay hypnotism. You'll see in the documents that the CIA had a contract with Eli Lilly Company from Switzerland to import tons of LSD. So they were bringing it into the country by the ton and using it for experimentation, and then to create other drugs that would cause complacency, brain fog, a lack of free will, things like Prozac and all the SSRI medications were deliberately developed, and they wanted the whole population docile, dumbed down, and eventually destroyed. So, am I?
Oh no, there's just it's almost like you read War and Peace. And you say, hey, why don't you give me a detailed summary in 30 minutes, right? Even. So back to your own personal story, right? So that was your first, 6 years old, that first event that happened. And so how did it continue? What was your trajectory? What happened to you as a child?
Well, I would be taken to, I never would know. I'd be in school. I'd be home with my family. We'd be living in a house somewhere. And suddenly I'd be taken away for unknown periods of time. All I can say is I know that I was in school half of the time, and then in other places, which they called annexes, and which the CIA list in those documents and call them safe houses. But we called them annexes. And in each annex, there would be a Dr. Green, who always had a foreign accent, and I suspect these were the Germans. There would be a Dr. White, who was a very abusive. And there would be nanny blacks, who would be men dressed as nuns. So they'd be dressed in frilly I don't know, frilly aprons of nuns, but long black gowns and aprons. And I was never quite convinced that they were even human. And then others who would come in, and like I had a handler called Chip, who was also called Dr. Brown, who did a lot of the training with the kids in my age group. So, and I'd be there for unknown periods of time, and they used massive drugs on us. So every session would begin with a shot of something. And I don't know if you've heard, blanking on her name, the folk singer who wrote the song "Play It Backwards," Joan Baez. Joan Baez was in that milieu, although she's several years older than me, but she wrote a song called "Play It Backwards." And in that, she describes the whole satanic MK Ultra mind control ritual perfectly. So if you want to listen to that, it begins, she said, every night begins with a pop of skin. So, and a sudden rush of stars. I mean, that's how it was. I mean, it was constantly being drugged and hypnotized and abused. And then I'd be tied to a wheel, a horizontal wheel with symbols on the wheel. And the wheel would be spun as people around the outside of the wheel would be chanting, "There is no light, there is no dark, there is no day, there is no night, there's no up, no down, no good, no bad." And going faster and faster and faster. And then it gets to the point where you can't stand it another minute. And then they say, "There's only green." And you're supposed to open your mouth and release your soul in a flash of green light. And I never did that. I held on to my soul. But if I had, I'd probably be Secretary of State by now. Seriously, no, you got the bling, you got the money, the jewels, the prize. If that's the prize you thought was a prize, I didn't see it as a prize. I saw it as a punishment. But that's why I'm not listed in Wikipedia. That's another punishment, you know. So that's I'm looking for repeating themes. And then I would go back home, but home would be somewhere else. So it would be the same family, but they would have moved to a different house, different place, different school. So it was constantly moving, everything changing. But half the time I was in the program being deeply, deeply programmed and educated in things like cybernetics, genocide, politics, sex magic. That was the program that they put me in. So, and sex magic, I describe it in Sparky. It took me years to get it completely pulled out of me so that it's right from Aleister Crowley, and it's right from Presidio. I spent 6 years going to Presidio in San Francisco and working on time travel at Fort Point, which is a point of a star fort underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. And all of that is about projecting your energy into someone else to make them want to do whatever you want them to do. And so I think that's preparing people or women, attractive women, to be honeypots, manipulators, spies. And I'm in a group right now, a survivors group with quite a few of them. And so, yeah, they'd all gone through that kind of training. And it really took me a long time to just be able to give it up entirely.
And so what was the sex magic training? It makes sense that it's obviously, if you understand even the basics of honeypot operations, and this is a common theme I've seen through some of the guests I've interviewed, that they were trained specifically as an entertainer, or having the skill to very quickly identify what someone's kind of darkest pleasure would be, and to use that as leverage. But what was the training? What that look like to be able to create that within you?
Well, a clear example of that is when they took a bunch of the little girls, so it must have been like 8 years old. We sort of woke up from this drug-induced coma, and we all had pretty dresses on. And they put us in a bus and gave us jelly beans that were, had something in them that really hyped us up. And they took us to Disneyland. And not Disney World, this is Disneyland, which was opened in 1955. So I've gone through the process of step by step remembering being taken to Frontierland, which had just opened, and being dumped off there. So they dumped the kids out, and in different places in Disneyland. They dumped me in Frontierland. And I hadn't eaten. I had no dinner, no breakfast, only these drugged up jelly beans. And I was desperately hungry. And if I wanted to go home, if I wanted to be able to get on the bus and get home, I had to find a daddy. I had to get the daddy to buy me the food that I wanted, and then to take me on the Wild Toad ride, which had just opened. So I don't know if you've been to Disneyland, but the Wild Toad ride was you got in this little car and you go into the dark and you're dodging rats and you're dodging barrels and all that stuff. But there's one point where you're on a railroad track. Oh yeah, there it is. You come to a railroad track and it's dark, so you can't see anything. You hear the train coming, but suddenly a bright light shines on you. But that's all you see is the light, and then the last minute the light goes away. But I knew that there was a camera behind that light, and they were filming what was happening in my car, and I had to get that daddy's hand on my body and pictures. And so I did it. I got a daddy to buy me a cheeseburger into the Wild Toad ride. And then by the time I was hungry for lunch, I found another daddy and got him to buy me lunch, and then into the Wild Toad ride, and then got him photographed. So that's, and when we got back to the bus, half the kids weren't on it, which means that half of them couldn't get daddies. That's the way it was presented to us. If you want to live, you get out there and find a daddy.
And so I know that J.R. Sweet, who was my first guest for the series, he talked, I think it was the Anaheim, right, location. Yeah. And he talked about the things that would happen with him there. The ride would stop and they'd be like, it'd have a malfunction, but there was a certain point and they would get off and they'd go, and there'd be underground facilities, and that's where he was, there were ritual sacrifices and all kinds of things that were happening there. And so were you ever exposed to that at Disneyland, or really? And what do you recall of that?
There's quite an extensive system under the rides, and then under Disneyland, and underground garages and this kind of thing. Saturnalia is a yearly Saturnalia. I was taken there repeatedly. And I think it was underneath the It's a Small World ride, because I kept hearing that music. But I remember being they would pick us up in white vans, and they took us underneath the through the parking lot and then down through another entrance. And then the Saturnalia is the Christmas celebration, because Christmas is the birth of Nimrod. It's not the birth of Jesus. It's a substitution. And the bright lights and the pine boughs and the drinking, all of that, and the child sacrifice. And I I do describe it in Sparky, but yes, all of that took place at Disneyland, but it also took place in other places. One very prominent place is Outlook Mountain, and that was the center. That was a film studio where they made Nazi propaganda. They made U.S. Navy propaganda there, and they made Nazi propaganda there. And in the 1940s, and it was actually built for when Germany won the war, and that was supposed to be Hitler's house in Los Angeles. It's still there. It's quite something. It's got antennas all over it, so they're using it for something. But they would, again, we'd get there in a bus, and we'd be taken underneath the building, which is where the huge studio was, and they would bring in the goats, the kids. We'd be kept in cages, but then they'd bring in the kids that were there for sacrifice, and the purpose of a lot of that was to do snuff films. So we were being forced to shoot at the other kids, and the kids would die. And I wasn't actually shooting at anybody. And later on, I realized when I actually shot a real gun, they didn't give us real guns, but they made us believe that we did, and that we were killing these other children. And the effect on us was, well, I suppose it was a way of sorting out those who would do it willingly and actually, kind of like doing it, and then people like me that wanted absolutely no part of it and would happily have shot my minders. I've met other survivors who've had very similar situations in Canada and in South Africa and also in Great Britain. So I think the MK Ultra programming was replicated through Five Eyes, the connections of the NSA and CIA to the English-speaking countries who became the Five Eyes spy network. Whereas I've met other people who have had similar programming, like Max Lowen, from the Jesuits, from the Vatican. And then I met another woman who had similar programming from the Jesuits in Japan, because the Jesuits had been in Japan for 400 years. So they had something similar, but not quite the same. So
yeah, well, that's one thing that you see with this, and I think that there's a lot of people that, especially here in America, was a very strong cognitive dissonance. I think as planned and as engineered, that they just write this all off as just wacky conspiracies and everything. But for me, I try to zoom out. If I met one person who told me this, I'd say, okay, well, maybe you have some implanted memories, or maybe something like that. But when you look at a broad spectrum of people from different countries, different nationalities, different classes, and you see that there is the exact same pattern across all of this, that's what makes you think there's something more to this. Because it's like, well, how is it that 100 people from 100 different backgrounds all tell you the exact same 5 things that happened to them?
Yes, and a very big common denominator is how we were kept in cages.
Really?
And yes, and the way they alternated cages so that you couldn't talk to each other or see each other, but you were aware of each other, and how they would torture a child so that we could all see it, but we couldn't see each other. So, I mean, it was just unspeakably horrible and cruel and similar in every one of these places. It was how to maximally traumatize children, and also the common result from all of this programming, and this is probably very ancient because they all have it, is to split it's not really splitting personality. And this is where people get confused, because schizophrenia is split personality. What's called dissociative identity disorder is when you actually build walls to hide traumatic memories. And this is done to children in early childhood. And you actually can, and I did, and I still have this problem. But it's also a blessing. It's been when you're working overseas and you're working in other languages and you're working with criminal groups and other governments. And I mean, to have dissociative identity, the ability to do that is very, very useful. You can also pass lie detector tests, and but you actually have dissociative divided into sections. And my problem is that I can't get easily from one to the other. So if I suddenly had to talk about being a physician, because I am a physician, I put myself through medical school and had a very successful practice for many years before I went to Russia. But if I had to get to that, I would have to mentally go down into my own basement, take a little walk, find the staircase, go up to the other files, and then it'd all be there. But the fluidity of being able to move to one section or the other isn't there. And you'll find that in pretty much all the trafficking survivors. And they did that on purpose. And if they're going to make you into a spy, and if you know what to look for, there are people who are causing all kinds of noise and problems right now for the whole country. And you look at them and you say, there it is. That's dissociative identity disorder, because they don't know when they're acting one way, they don't realize that they acted completely differently yesterday. So if people realize, I mean, trying to understand everything that's been done is going to be impossible. And if you take the people that have been programmed, they took the best and brightest. So these are strong, intelligent people, and I know a lot of them that haven't come out yet, and probably never will, because there's no advantage to it. I did it because I'm 77, and I want to make sure that that what I know is out there, so that people like you who weren't programmed and dissociated and all this can take this information and put it together, because it's probably pretty simple. It's scaring children to death, sacrificing children, extracting chemicals from children's bodies, which are proven. Everybody knows that and this is something very ancient. Drinking children's blood prolonged life and was like a elixir of youth. So now the German scientists had refined it. And I spent many sessions with a tube up inside the veins of my own head as I was undergoing the torture and the terror sections. They would be extracting blood. Extremely dangerous. And I've had many surgeries and lots of problems with that since then. And was never able to explain to anyone why I had a big hole up there. So it just has to be seen. It has to be seen. And who would want to look? You know, unspeakable evil is real. Demons are real. Evil is real. All of these things are real, and it's so bizarre to people that have been tortured and abused and terrified and watched human sacrifices at Disneyland to think that it's the Disney model. That was also a 20th century thing, where suddenly the stories are being told of happily ever after. You know, of like, it doesn't go into the difficulties of life. Every movie has a happy ending, you know. There's the whole Disney model is psychological programming. And the Disney facility was the worst of the worst.
Do you think that from the outset, do you think that was Disney, because when you start to kind of tie all these things together and you get into the history of Walt Disney and the CIA, and I think the CIA actually kind of gave him a lot of the land to get started, and I mean, was Disney, like, from the get-go just an operation? Like, was it basically a mind control operation from the get-go, or was it, like we've been told, this guy was a great illustrator, made these cartoons people loved, and it grew into this massive empire?
Anything that grows into a massive empire has got something else behind it.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen. If a great talent arises and begins to shine, they'll destroy it. And that's happened recently. If a star shines too brightly and somebody shows independence and free thinking, gotta go. So that tells you a great deal right there. Plus, the Disney Museum is on the Presidio. Presidio is the northwest portion of San Francisco, which is actually an old star fort, and it overlooks the ocean, and it overlooks San Francisco Bay and the inlet of the Golden Gate Bridge. And the Golden Gate Bridge then runs through the Presidio. And Fort Point, which is the point of the Star Fort, is underneath Golden Gate Bridge. And that's where I was from 1961 to 1966. Now, also there were Michael Aquino, who's 2 years older than me, who was a very scared, skinny kid. And he was easy to intimidate. Anton LaVey, who intimidated him all the time, who is the founder of the Church of Satan. Also, Charles Manson was there. Phil Spector was there. And those two were later convicted of horrendous crimes, and they died in the same wing of San Quentin prison, which you could see from Fort Point. So it was just... and the reason I wanted to connect this to Disney is Disney built their museum. Their entire interactive museum complex is right above, is in the Presidio and right above the tunnels. And there are tunnels all through the Presidio underneath they were there before human beings landed. They were there as part of the Star Fort system underneath that cliff. I don't know if you've seen pictures of the cliff that there's the Presidio, which was a fort, Golden Gate Bridge, and then underneath, it's about 1,000-foot cliff, and then underneath there is Fort Point, which is the point, and then accessing into the cliffs, you can actually go into an area that's actually quite a bit like Bohemian Grove, with the same kind of, it was used for the same kind of procedures and same kind of rituals, and right on top of it is the Disney Memorial Museum.
Gosh, and so you mentioned the chemicals in the blood, right? You mentioned chrome, or adrenochrome, and so when you're looking at the role of that as a drug, I mean, you can see that anything that can be commoditized, whether it's selling a pharmaceutical drug, selling a child for sex, any of these things that can be commoditized, they will figure out ways of exploiting it, especially if they're more black kind of underground operations. That's where a lot of money can be made. And
no taxes.
Exactly. And so the adrenochrome, how prevalent is that in our society at the upper levels? I mean, how much of the children that go in, I imagine a lot of the children that die, they don't just die and they get rid of them. I'm sure that they die and they extract whatever value comes out of these bodies. So what does the adrenochrome operation look like from what you've seen of it?
Well, the adrenochrome is like when I had the cannula up my nose into my venous sinus, and they were extracting blood from around my pineal gland while they were torturing me. So it's extreme fear, extreme pain, high levels of adrenaline, hallucinations. All of this makes that blood, they called it magical in their properties, and really a fountain of youth. And I've got to wonder, you've got Ozempic and all these people getting really skinny, but they look very bad. And I wonder if they're also on the adrenochrome. Also, what that does to your body over time if you take it repeatedly. You can buy it. It's for sale on the dark web. You can buy a vial for, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars. And you can also get it cheaper from China. So it was just, and again, it's all back to the idea that you're turning men into gods. You're making human beings immortal, which they shouldn't be. I don't know. I find it so upsetting. And I wonder how I could have been going through this for 77 years and really, and keeping my soul. I never gave it up. I took the punishment. I fought against it. I went to Russia for 20 years, which probably saved me because I wasn't so attacked there. Or at least I was dealing with mafia and traffickers and corrupt politicians, this kind of thing, which is nothing compared to dealing with the people who belong to the cabal in this country. But but I never stopped believing in good and in righteousness and in God and in Jesus and I see from this experience I've had, I see why Christianity is such a threat. Because somehow I think it was through my grandmother who taught me the Lord's Prayer when I was 3 years old. I got a link to Christianity. Even though from then on, it was Satanic Bible. I was forbidden to have any kind of religious education. I was punished if I tried to get some. Even now, I can't read the Bible. The text starts going backwards, but I can listen to it. So I've listened to it several times. But how pure that connection was that let me keep my soul, and why other people chose to give their souls up for the bling. And I think those are the people that are taking the adrenochrome now, and because it's a false religion to believe that we are above the Creator. I mean, just look at a weed, look at a leaf. We can't create anything. We're a species. So rather than be overwhelmingly confused by all of this, we have to get above it. We have to get beyond it. The church in America, I don't see it as having the capacity to even recognize what's happening. It's been so thoroughly infiltrated, and the schools are infiltrated. There are so many programs, and MK Ultra morphed into a variety of programs, one of them being GATE, G-A-T-E, the Gifted and Talented Education Programs, which was a form of mind control that many, many people have gone through. And I didn't even know about it till I heard Candace Owens talk about it. She's been through it. Charlie Kirk went through it. But it's clearly, in hearing them talk about it, it was a variation of the MK Ultra, only moving right into public schools. So they had access once a week to all the kids in a grade level, and so by the time kids were out of middle school, they'd had total indoctrination, and they don't remember any of it. So
yeah, I was actually in that program.
I wondered.
Yeah, that GATE program, and I dropped out like in the third grade, which was probably good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I remember. I mean, and it was always like I really enjoyed it. We'd do really cool, kind of challenging activities and puzzles and a lot of logic problems. But yeah, we called it enrichment. That's what they called it for us. It was enrichment, and I was maybe one of maybe 6 or 7 kids in my grade that got kind of plucked out for this for whatever reasons. And we'd go on every Friday. We'd go to a different school. It was a whole different school we'd go to every Friday, and we'd have a classroom just with the other enrichment kids. And when we yeah, it's just interesting that I don't have any, like, I don't think anything bad was done to me there. Like I don't have any kind of memories that have ever come up. It was always just, I really enjoyed it. I had some good friends that were there, but maybe because I kind of only did, I think, 3 years of it. I think it was first, second, and third grade. So maybe it was just kind of limited, but yeah, because I was actually just looking up and seeing, like, okay, I looked up GATE, and yeah, actually there you go. Right. So yeah, interesting. Yeah. So yeah, so it was never called GATE for us. It was just called enrichment. And so they say that, the purpose of the Gifted and Talented Enrichment Programs, formerly known as enrichment, right, aims to foster critical thinking, creativity, preventing boredom, etc. And so they're structured as pull-out programs where students would leave regular classrooms for specialized advanced instruction, after school activities. And yeah, this is exactly what I went through as a kid. And it's just, yeah, it's in the public schools. It's just interesting. And so,
did you have the pink fizzy drink?
I think so. I think I remember the little paper cups, like the little Solo cups. They had a little, right? Yeah, I mean, that's what's wrong with me. I had too much pink drink.
Pink drink, right? Yeah, people that were in it for years talk about it, and the pink drinks got stronger and stronger as the kids got older, and the things that they saw and underwent got more confusing. And talking to people who've been in GATE, it was in the 50s when I was when MK Ultra was just started. It started with a bang. So by 1976, they had 150 sites running, at least, that they reported to Congress. But so there were probably many, many more. But they really wanted to get into the schools, and they weren't into the schools yet. But I think by the 1980s, they had the GATE program and probably other so-called enrichment programs. So they got right into the schools. And I saw
curious,
the TP.
Why would you suspect that I was in that program? Just out of curiosity.
You're the right age, and you'd be the right category, obviously a gifted kid. And you just fit the type. So be flattered. That's a good thing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. That's what kind of. Well, I mean, I ended up going. I went to art school. I went to private art school. I mean, I didn't go. In high school, I spent most of my time just in the art room, just drawing and painting and sculpting, and which maybe was helpful because it kept me out of a lot of the academic stuff. So that's where we're going to stop for today. What Juliette just described, the programs, the annexes, the spinning wheel, what they were doing to children, and then finding out that a version of that same program was running inside the public schools, like our public schools. That's not that comfortable to think about, but I think it's important to look at this and not look away, because I think the only way that something like this can be dealt with is we have to understand it, right? We have to pretend it isn't real, because I want to know my enemy. I want to know your enemy, because we're together, right? And when we're together, we're stronger. And so I want you to get ready now, because part 2, we get into a really important place of hope. And I want you to know that, because it's really key that amidst all this darkness, we find those reasons for hope. So Juliette spent 20 years in Russia rescuing 70,000 children, and she came back to the United States, and she kept going. And so in part 2, she's going to be describing about where we go from here, what she's seeing here in America. So make sure you're subscribed and set a reminder for next week's episode, which will be next Saturday night. Part 2 is really worth it. In the meantime, I want you to do something specific. Don't just share this video everywhere. Find one person. Find one person in your life who you think is ready to hear this, and sit down with them and watch it together and have a real conversation about it. That's how we're going to make change. We have to do it together. And if this episode hits you, please just leave a comment below. I read all of them. And honestly, your comments matter more than you know, not just to me, but also to Juliette, right? So she's 77 and she's been telling this story for decades while people have been telling her she was crazy. So help show her she's not alone. And also make sure you hit that like button, whatever platform you're watching on. It matters more than most people realize for getting this content in front of more people who need to see it. So until next week, stay grounded, guard your mind, protect the innocent around you, and don't confuse seeing the darkness with surrendering to it.